I'm Noah Abrams, and welcome to The Days Between, the show where I talk to my friends, people I admire, and people I want to better understand about success, failure, happiness, and misery, as well as all the other elements that make up a life well lived. Along the way, we'll look at mental, spiritual, and physical health, and when life didn't go as planned, the steps they took to get themselves from A to B and beyond. This week, I'm speaking with Butch Walker, from cutting his teeth as a teenager during the salad days of the raucous Sunset Strip, to writing and producing power pop hits for some of the biggest stars of today. As a musician and producer, Butch has seen it all. His passion for music and a commitment to doing the work has given him the longevity and perspective to successfully navigate the changing winds of the music business for over 3 decades. As a solo artist, he is able to, in his own words, fly below the radar, free of outside interference, creating exactly what he wants, when he wants, and in the process, garner a loyal following willing to show up time and again to support his musical exploration. Butch has achieved success on a level many dream about, but few are able to reach, only to, on more than one occasion, have it all taken away, sometimes overnight. Relying on a do-it-yourself work ethic, he has rebuilt his career stronger every time, all the while maintaining a humility and sense of humor that is uniquely his own. But rather than take my word for it, here's Butch Walker on The Days Between. Can you describe the room that we're in right now? Where are we?
We are in a barn. It's the party barn. And it's the barn on my property, which used to house 6 horses. And now it houses 6 drum kits. So it's I converted it into a studio. I pretty much live out here. I spend all my time down here now.
You're not from Nashville, though, correct?
I grew up in a little town called Cartersville. When I was there, it was just very conservative Bible Belt, as you are in the rural South, basically, or any of the states in the South. I remember just being forced to go to church, which I never enjoyed and never liked and never connected with it. But as you do, you comply as a kid, and everybody was pretty conservative nature, and that also included, when it came to music and like rock music, there was not a lot of people that I could relate to that listened to rock music. I could count them on one hand that I could find in a circle during my school years that liked rock music, and their parents would even let them listen to it. I know that sounds very footloose, but it was one of those towns where you're not going to play that. That's the devil's music, and it was not in my family, but still enough to where it was really hard to find musicians and really hard to find people to connect with musically outside of just listening to records stoned in a bedroom. That's fine and all, but I wanted to play music. So finding musicians in the town was kind of hard.
Was there a moment that you realized that you were either meant to do something else or you just knew that that wasn't going to be your life?
Yes, that moment would be I begged my parents to take me to see the rock group Kiss when I was 8 years old in 1977. I begged and pleaded for them to take me because it was on New Year's Eve at the Omni in Atlanta. That's a huge sports arena. It's where all the rock concerts, the big ones, were. I'd never been to a concert. This is my first time going to even a fucking concert. So when you go see Kiss at the height of their bombastic, pompous popularity in 1977 on the Love Gun tour, shit's kind of ruined for you after that. Like there's nothing that will ever compare to that experience, the first concert you ever see. I mean, before that, all I ever saw was like the cover band at Six Flags playing under the shed, or like the church band. And then seeing people perform on TV. I was obsessed, I was just obsessed. I just loved it. And somehow, some way, my parents were able to be coaxed into taking the whole family because, I said, make it my birthday present and my Christmas present combined. I don't care. I just want to go. And so ended up going to that concert. And I mean, I saw 20,000 people stoned out of their gourds, losing their minds at people, at Gene breathing fire and, Paul jumping, doing splits, and Ace blowing his guitar up and smoke coming out of it, and Peter Chris's drum kit levitating up like 13 feet in the air. And you're just like, what the fuck is going on here? I want this. And everybody around me, all these older dudes in their teens and 20s and stuff are dressed up just like Kiss. You know, they're in full makeup and full costume, passing joints over my mom and dad to other people. This was, 77. So, and I never even knew, I didn't know what that was. I'd never smelled pot in my life until that night. I can still remember what it smelled like,
How did that manifest itself into you playing music?
It didn't even have to. It was on from that minute. From that day, I begged for a drum kit. I played drums not very well, but my cousins, my two older cousins that lived in Columbia, South Carolina, were also the same ages as my siblings. So they were 2 and 4 years older than me, but they were the coolest guys. They were like super good looking, super talented, very cool. They were popular. They were insanely talented, and they were in a band in elementary school, and prodigies. Like the oldest one, Zach, he was 3 or 4 years older than me and could play drums like as good as anybody in a touring band by the time he was in like 6th grade. Total prodigy, monster player, and monster singer. So I would always just beg to go up to Columbia to see my cousins just because I wanted to be able to watch them play music. And they'd have their little band rehearsals in the basement of their house. And that was huge for me. That was all it took, because I was like, it's within reach. It's realistic. It wasn't like this will never happen for me. I don't live in a big city where there's actual musicians. These guys lived in Columbia, which by all accounts was, not much different than Cartersville, Georgia, really, but they were so talented and so good. So, I had to go to Rome to find musicians, which was 30 minutes away where I was born, but Rome was bigger. Rome was sort of in between, like the size of Cartersville and Atlanta, but it was a big enough town where there was a lot more people, had 3 times the population of Cartersville. So I was able to find musicians through a guitar teacher that I took guitar lessons from that was in Rome, where I was taking guitar lessons later in life. I jumped ahead because I realized I said I was starting off on drums, but that was very fleeting because I realized I didn't want to have to sit down behind a band. I wanted to stand up and be up front. And so guitar was the way to that future for me. So, and then by the time I was in 9th grade, we were doing these all guitar rock jazz ensembles that our guitar teacher would put all of his students. He had 50 students, so he would cherry pick and put the best guitar players and a bass player and a drummer and rent out the Rome City Auditorium. And we'd work up these instrumentals, and it would just be this big wall of sound coming off of a stage. And that was fun because that was sort of my first foray into playing music in a band and playing in shows. And that was very, very addicting.
Did you have a band in high school?
Yeah, I'd gotten in a band called Standing Room Only.
How old are you at this point? This is
15, 16. I think I might have been 16. I was able to drive by the end of that band for sure.
So this is like sophomore, junior year.
Yeah. I was driving 16. And then when I switched schools, I switched to a city school in Cartersville for my junior year because I was able to take this program called DCT, which was diversified co-op training, which means you could get out of school after lunchtime every day as long as you held down a job where you worked an X amount of hours part-time a week. And I did that teaching guitar lessons at the local music store. So that afforded me to get out of school every day. It just meant you were never going to get you would graduate, but not, you're not going to be like going to Harvard or any shit like that. And I didn't care because I already knew I was going to move to Hollywood the minute I got out of high school. I was so antsy to do it. And my dad basically begged me with tears in his eyes to finish high school because he did not. And he didn't want me to regret that. And I love that he did that because begrudgingly I stayed, but I'm glad that I did.
Was he supportive of the music though?
At that point, it was a dark period for my dad. He had lost his dad already and he was losing his mom when I was in high school, and he was having a fucking full-on meltdown midlife crisis, just kind of angry all the time and yelling at everybody and not happy. But when you're this self-absorbed, clueless high school kid who's just all he cares about is fucking and drinking and playing music, I didn't think about the levity of it. I didn't think about that it was a big deal. I was just at that point you're just thinking that your parents are the cliche to a rock and roll kid where they're just like, turn that shit off, get a job, get a haircut. And so you expect that from your parents. So when it happens, you're not shocked or surprised. You still love them. But he was definitely kind of that way. My mom was supportive, but my dad was very much like, you're going to be a loser. You need to get a real job. You're not going to be able to have any responsibility doing this. And he was blue collar, worked hard for his family, made the money, what he could, which we never had much. We lived middle class as anybody, but he worked hard and provided. And my mom worked hard and provided. So it was all just tests. Like I did go get a job and I did prove to him I could make some money making music. And then I also played clubs 6 nights a week because they said, I know you got these opportunities to play bar gigs, but you're in high school. And if you're going to do that, you have to maintain a passing grade average in high school for the rest of your time in high school, or else we're not going to let you do it. And so I said, fine. So I kind of just like full of pride went even harder at school and ended up like having all A's and B's when I got out of high school. I wanted to prove to them that I could finish school with good grades and also still play clubs 6 nights a week. Now, I didn't sleep for shit. I mean, I was sleeping 2-3 hours a night at best. I'd get home at 3 a.m. and, as fucked up as it is to say, I'd get home trashed, like from drinking Long Island iced teas and beer all night and making out with women in their 20s in their car in between sets, playing at these metal bars. I fucking loved it. It was amazing to me. I felt like I was getting away with murder. Like getting up and going to school the next day felt surreal, and going into school and having eyeliner still running down my face and dead to the world and red eyes and just like, but doing the work, and like all my, all the cheerleaders and popular jocks and stuff are looking at you going like, oh, did you play in your little band last night? Maybe you can play our prom this year, get some exposure. And I'd be like, yeah, you have no idea what I'm exposed to already. So it was pretty funny, in a weird, like being at these bars with people that were old enough to be these girls' moms every night and hanging out with rock dudes who had already been to LA and been to New York and were back in Atlanta and talking about how hard it was and how impossible and how crazy competitive it was and how you'd never make it if you went and all that. And of course, what did I do? I was like, oh, I'm going to do that. No, I'm going to do it. So at that point, I'm in a band that's a metal band. And ironically, it's back to guys from Rome, Georgia. And it's some of the guys that I took lessons with. So we got pretty serious about it and said, okay, we're getting pretty good. We should start maybe trying to come up with our own songs. You weren't allowed to play originals at cover bars in Atlanta. And plus, nobody wanted to hear originals. They only wanted to hear you play AC/DC and Kiss and Dokken and Motley Crue and shit like that. So we would play those bars and play those songs, but then we would sneak in a song or two. And then we'd record them on my 4-track in the barn at my mom and dad's place. And we took that demo and we ended up like a 4-song original demo. And the day I graduated high school, the day after, we left for LA.
What was going through your mind at that point?
Well, a lot was going through my mind because at the time, you got to figure this is before the internet and before phones and before any information. So the only thing there was print. So if you're going to find an apartment, you got to look in the classifieds in a newspaper. And out there, it'd be so competitive, you almost had to commit to something before you even had a chance to go look at it because it was so competitive out there. Same with really not even knowing where to live, where to go, where to rehearse. You just kind of had to go out there and let the paper trails lead you. And you'd see, rehearsal space for rent hanging up on a telephone pole, and you'd take a number and then there you go. You've got a rehearsal space if you can afford that. Same with an apartment, same with everything. So we got out there and it was literally a sea of hair bands all doing what we were out there to aspire to do. And a lot of them doing it way better and way further along than four rednecks from Rome, Georgia. And, but to be fair, most of the bands out there had moved from all of their Rome, Georgias to this place. And the Sunset Strip was the place to be in the 80s to play shows, promote your band. And if you're lucky, you got a gig. And if you got a gig, you had to pay to play, which means you had to be responsible for X amount of tickets sold to your show, or you would not play the show that night. It was strict. It was bullying, like mafia style tactic that all the venues on the Sunset Strip did. But in a way it was good because it made the cream rise to the top, and it made people hustle. Like, it sucked, but you couldn't be soft. You had to work hard. You had to promote hard, play hard, everything. And after about 6 or 7 months, we were already able to start headlining. We used that demo tape, and we got what was called the No Bozos Jam on Monday nights, every Monday night at the Whiskey, a Go-Go. And we used to go there, and we played it, and we got written up in the local rock paper as like tightest band on the Sunset Strip. And we had never played a show before. And this is our first time being an all original band and not playing covers. And we only had 4 songs, so we had to play them twice. After that, it was just buzz and word of mouth because it was all out there. There was no internet or nothing like that at the time. So it was just people talking. So we ended up having so many people talking about our band that when we'd go flyer on the Sunset Strip to a sea of basically, of girls, rock fans that would be on the Sunset Strip just out there to meet guys. And all the guys were in bands. And the ratio was 99% dudes in bands and then mostly women there to meet them. And you'd be flyering with your flyers and trying to sell tickets. You'd be basically just pimping your shit on this. And there'd be a band right behind you coming up right behind you to do the same thing to the same girl. But we some reason it stuck and our shows were good and we were entertaining and we could all play too. I can't say that every band out there was really good at playing. There was a lot of all looks, no hooks. And that was rampant in Hollywood. So a lot of hairspray, a lot of good looking dudes and great clothes and for that genre. And absolutely no chops, no ability to play. Like you'd be like, oh my God, the singer's fucking awful. Or the band can't play. And then they'd have a full house of screaming girls at their show. And we'd be like, we can do this. We can do that. Are you kidding me? We're 10 times better than these assholes. And so we did. And by the end of our first year there, we were selling out Gazzari's and the Whiskey and the Roxy on our own, not signed to any label, and getting paid instead of paying to play. Not much, but still. And then labels started sniffing around, and then they came out and we got signed.
A year into making the leap from Georgia to the Sunset Strip, you guys had reached, certainly I would assume at that point, a level of success in your mind. Yeah.
Well, sure. To us, that was doing the impossible. Living 6 guys in a 1-bedroom, unair-conditioned apartment building in Hollywood, in East Hollywood at the time, which was sketchy and all Bloods and Crips and homeless people. And this was like, in 88. So it was not a realistic way to live, but we did. And I think just being so young and dumb and reckless and clueless that like we knew there was no other choice. It was like, I'm not going to stay in fucking Cartersville. So yeah, we thought we had already like achieved a massive level of success just getting signed to a major record deal, which means nothing. And today it means absolutely nothing, but nothing can come from it. And most of the time nothing does. Not to sound negative, but it's just the reality of it that we didn't know. At the time, you just thought if you get signed to this bidding war record deal, you've got it fucking made. You're going to have tons of money. You're never going to have to work again. And it's like, that's a sobering reality that only about 3% of artists that get signed actually recoup or make any money or do anything or go on to any type of success. The rest of them, a lot of times the records never even came out that they did. And then they're back working at the guitar shop. At least we knew that reality because we had been told that many times. can't remember by who, but it was good to know that because it made you realistic and it made you have a little bit more realistic outlook, and that it could all end any minute and you had to work a lot harder just to stay relevant.
Was there anything that you learned during that time that has carried through the rest of your career, just in terms of the competitive nature of it?
I realized, and to this day, that you've got to be good. You've got to be good at what you do, and you've got to believe it in order to keep people coming back. I'm happy that I can still play right now to a very dedicated following of people that come see me play in decent sized rooms all over the country because I care. Like, I care about the show and I give it, and I care about it being great, and I care about it connecting with people. And I think that they care that you care. And I've seen a lot of people just phone it in, and it's over before it starts for them.
And at the time, you weren't the lead singer, right? You were just playing guitar at that point.
Yeah, I was just a shredder.
What value, looking back, did you find in playing that supporting role and not being the guy up front? Were you able to see mistakes that other people were making and not have to make them on your own?
I guess so. I mean, it was a strange dynamic in that band with our singer. So I never really admired, or I didn't want to be the singer ever. You know, I was hip to what was going on at the time. And at the time was the ratio of bands that were successful in our genre had a front man, not a front man who also played bass or also played lead guitar, or even more rare, the drummer singer. It just didn't happen. So, you know, we had our blonde-haired, blue-eyed, screaming singer with the high voice that everybody else had at the time. And I think it was better to start as the guitar player and core songwriter for the band because I didn't ever get my head in the cloud right away. That came way later in life. But like I'm saying, I didn't get my head in the clouds early on like a lot of frontmen did, because you get signed and all of a sudden the label and all these other people are telling you that you're the reason why this band is signed, and you're the face, you're the looks, you're the voice, you're the guy. And that's going to go to some young 22-year-old kid's, 21-year-old kid's head in a minute if you're not careful. And I think that happened to a lot of people. And I just never was afforded that possibility because I was the dark and mysterious, long, black-haired guitar player in the shadows. But at the same time, I think being so opinionated and driven and having a lot to say about the outcome of everybody's part eventually led me to be the front man and the singer.
What was the name of the band at this point?
At that point, we changed our name from Bite the Bullet to South Gang.
What happened to South Gang?
Not a fucking thing. So no, I'm not. I take that back. I mean, that would be a disrespect to the guys in the band because I know we have a lot of great growing memories of turning into real people from being in that band and having a lot of experiences. And you know, the first thing was get in the studio and make a overpriced, laborious, long process of a record, which is what everybody did back then because it was absolutely a huge budget record deal. So we went in with a producer that we spent so much money, and we recorded all the record at Village Recorder in Santa Monica. And then, okay, great, we got that. Now let's get the big guy that costs a ton of money to mix the record. And now, let's get the big video director that did all the Whitesnake and Aerosmith videos at the time that were like just every video on MTV was by this one guy. So we got him. That's kind of how it all worked back then. So not only are we learning experiences and lessons in how to spend and how not to spend money, you know, then we go on the road immediately, and of course, they put our spoiled asses up in a tour bus, the first tour, with no fans anywhere. And, you know, our video is like at best in rotation on Headbangers Ball on Saturday nights, late at night on MTV, which was about as good as it ever got for us, was getting played on there. And we never got on a coveted opening slot for a big band, which is what we always wanted. But our kind of band was a dime a fucking dozen. So there was a million bands you could pick from if you wanted an opening band that was up and coming. And so, you know, we just weren't engaging or good enough yet. So we had to go out and earn respect by touring. I'd say the best thing that ever happened from that was just the fall from grace, having to go straight from having a full road crew in a tour bus on the first album to the follow-up record and being in a van and a trailer with our own gear, and then from there just down to where we were nobody to help us but ourselves in a 15-passenger van, no crew, no nothing, doing everything ourselves. That's the best lessons you could ever learn in life. So there's lots of takeaways from that era that mean a lot to me now, more than the music, that's for sure.
There's a story that I've heard you tell about Desmond. What was significant about that relationship?
So Desmond Child, who at the time was the hottest songwriter to the stars, like there was, like he was the biggest name in like hair metal bands. You know, he wrote fucking Living on a Prayer, for God's sakes. He wrote all these big songs with Bon Jovi and all these big songs for Alice Cooper and Kiss and Cher. So my hero was Desmond Child, because I saw him on the credits for all these records and was like, that's the guy we got to work with. So when I mentioned, you know, we were in the studio making our first record and spending way too much money, of course, the biggest expense we had was getting Desmond Child to come in and not only co-write the entire record with us, but also be executive producer on the record. Desmond at the time, you know, was living the high life, obviously. And Desmond, you know, openly gay, very flamboyant, very eccentric, very much a diva, if you will. He'll tell you this. You know, we would go over to his house every day to write for the record. And he lived in Santa Monica on this beautiful palm tree lined street near the ocean, and servants around everywhere, and, you know, assistants and people answering the door in booty shorts. And, you know, it was like boogie nights, you know? And we go to the door and there's this big strapping, chiseled faced dude named Curtis comes to the door, and Curtis opens up and lets us in, and we're all just big eyed because we're all just a bunch of fucking rednecks from Georgia. And Desmond would sit down to write with us at the keyboard, and, you know, we were not songwriters yet. We thought we knew how to write songs, because you'd think your shit doesn't stink when you get signed off of your own songs. And then you're thinking, well, we obviously are good enough. But I definitely took away learning how to write songs from this guy. And that to this day, I still credit him to teaching me how to single-handedly write a song. But I learned life lessons as well. Case in point, I remember being there one day and I sang some idea or something, and then he had another idea, because he's always pretty stuck on his way or the highway back then, you know, which he earned it. So he sang something and I didn't like it, and I thought it sounded kind of just mushy, too romantic. It was a lyric idea. And of course, my young, dumb redneck ass, first thing I blurted out was, no, that shit's gay. And I didn't even think about it. I didn't think 2 seconds. I didn't think 2 thoughts about it, because that's just what I always said. And when I saw like the needle on the record scratch and get quiet, and he just looks up very kind of shocked, and he just looks at me and he says, "Gay? What do you mean gay?" And then I knew he was gay, but I didn't even know what I was even saying, which it was extremely offensive and a terrible thing to say it in a derogatory manner like that. And I just sat there in shock, that thinking to myself, well, I just insulted the one man that is my hero. I'm a fucking idiot. And somehow I scrambled and backpedaled my way out of the conversation, but the mark had been made. And, you know, I love the fact that he gave me benefit of the doubt, even to the point where he would be like, you know, I think the next day his comeback to me was when I came in with a song idea with a title, and it had love in the title. And he just said, "What do you know about love? You're not even a fucking person yet." And I wanted to kill him for that. But then I stopped and I was like, oh God, he's right. I've never been married and divorced. I've never really had my heart stomped. I don't know what love is. And he was right. But it was also his kind of way of digging back at me for being a young, dumb redneck and throwing the word gay around in a derogatory fashion.
You mentioned that you guys are friends now. How did that relationship develop from there?
I didn't speak to Desmond for a long time. many, many years, I've, just fell out of touch with everybody. And then just a few years ago, I would say maybe about 5 years ago, my family and I were traveling from Atlanta to Nashville. We went into the American Airlines lounge, and I just had this really strange deja vu that was so weird. When I looked over, at the drink stand and, getting sodas and waters and stuff, and I saw this guy. I told my wife this. I said, this is really going to sound strange, but that guy looks just like the guy that answered the door at Desmond's house when I was, and that would have been so random because I never said 2 words to that guy. Barely remember him, but I remembered his face. And then I saw him go back over to a table, and there was 2 little blonde-haired boys. And, it was like a scene in a movie when like the crowd in between you parts, and there's Desmond sitting with 2 little boys and Curtis. And I was like, holy shit, that's Desmond. And I walk over and I said, hey, Desmond, you probably don't remember me or recognize me, but I said, I'm Butch. I played in a band called South Gang. You worked with us on our first debut record. And he cut me off and he got up and he just hugged me and he goes, I've been following your whole career. I'm so proud of you. And it like made me well up with tears. I was just so like, I couldn't believe it that this guy had been like following it the whole time and was proud, because it made me the most proud, that I could like still be something in the eyes of this guy.
The band South Gang breaks up.
Yet.
How old are you at this point?
22, 23. We were in China, of all places. Super weird. We went over there for a tour that we should have never done. We were the first American rock band to play China and Inner Mongolia. That was the angle that they pitched. You're going to play arenas. It's going to be amazing. Like, well, nobody knows who we are. It doesn't matter. They're starving for it over there. They're going to love it. It's going to be packed every night. You're going to have crazy, adoring fans and blah, blah, blah. So on paper, you're like, okay, and to some young, dumb rednecks that are uncultured and uneducated about a lot of stuff, we were like, oh man, it's kind of like being big in Japan. I mean, it's close enough. We'll take it. While we were over there playing these shows, which by the way, every show was poorly attended. No one was allowed to stand up. No one was allowed to be on the floor. They had to all be in the stands and the bleachers. We had to play on the floor, out of the arena floors, and the nearest person was like 50 feet away. They couldn't yell. They couldn't scream. There's MPs with guns on every corner in case shit got out of hand. It was like playing a cocktail lounge or something, but in a cavernous arena every night in these third world crazy little farm towns where some people had never even seen a Westerner ever. It was weird and sobering, and we were anything but sober the entire time. We're just on these 30-hour train rides from city to city because it's so vast, with me and the bass player Jace plotting and scheming a new band because we were like, this is fucked up. When we get back to the States, we need to break this shit up and do something else. We need to do what we really want to do. We just kind of had falling out after falling out while we were over there. It disintegrated into an ugly last day where we incited a riot at not the last show, but it was the last show. It was supposed to be like third to the last show. And we basically encouraged everybody to get out of their seats and come down to the floor and come up to the stage. And that was bad. And the place got gassed by officials, and people were running on stage and literally pulling our hair out. They were fanatical. It was like they'd never seen, you were like an alien to them. So they wanted to like get a piece of it. And we were whisked off into a van while the place was filled up with tear gas and taken to the train. As again, just a bunch of young, dumb rednecks were like, that was fucking awesome. That was amazing. It was the closest thing that we got to feeling like we were putting on a rock show in China. And we woke up from our train ride. We woke up at the airport in Beijing with plane tickets and no translator around, none of our bags, none of our gear, nothing. We had a whole semi of gear flown over for the shows. That was MIA. They basically had left us our tickets high and dry and canceled the rest of the tour. And this was a big testament to our road crew. We had 2 road crew guys. They volunteered to stay behind and find the gear and get it home. So they went some 20 hours away to the last town we played and found the gear, came back in an open bed truck to Beijing, flew home on top of the gear, on top of the road cases in a cargo jet. And that was the end of that band.
You're back in LA. The band is done. The style of music you were playing at the time was not popular, or was just not.
It was day late and $1 short.
Big label deal, I'm assuming, is gone.
Happily.
Where's your head at this point?
Our head was where it was when we were on those train rides, where we said, you know what? If we're going to do anything, we got to do it ourselves. Let's get a van. Let's get this band together. Let's make some recordings. I'll produce it. I'm not that good at it, but I'll figure it out. And we just did everything in-house, and we became completely DIY for the next decade. We went back home. We started the band. We added a couple of new players. We just started playing shows everywhere we could, and we became a popular local draw in Atlanta again. We started over from scratch. We started over playing bars in Rome, Georgia again, believe it or not, to like 10 people and my dad doing merch.
You mentioned when you were in high school and they said, you can maybe play our prom, get some exposure, and you're already looking way out on the horizon. You're looking at LA. You go to LA, within a year, you get signed to a major label, and now you're back where you started. You're back basically at the ground level.
Yeah.
What was the emotion behind that?
It was excitement. We were still young. We were still in our early 20s and mid 20s. We were like, fuck this, man. This is exciting. We get a new lease on life. That band imploded and disintegrated before we would have having had a choice to do something else after it if we would have gotten successful, because you wouldn't have.
So there was no sense of failure at all?
No. Matter of fact, we looked at it as a blessing, because most people that were, and still to this day, you come to find most people that were in those bands at that era, in that genre, when they got successful and then their day came and went, it was hard for them to get a gig doing anything after that, because the scene kind of just wasn't taken seriously. And it didn't matter if those people went on to do something completely different. You were branded as that guy. So we took it as I guess kind of a get out of jail free card.
So you were aware at the time not getting what you want was actually a blessing?
Yes. Yeah. Well, because we'd already seen it happen. We'd already seen several of our friends' bands, and it came and went, and those guys were like back working at grocery stores. So we were like, man, we needed to take this as a sign that it didn't happen for a reason, and now's our time to make it happen. And now we can go out and do it our way and do everything ourselves and control it all ourselves and have no record label and nobody telling us how to do it. Because that was literally everyone telling us how to do everything. No one letting us do anything after we got signed the way we wanted to, really. And so we were excited. It was awesome. I mean, it was awesome, but it was a little bit frustrating to start over from nothing and playing to 10 people a night and being like, oh, this is dark. So we found our outlet was we could go play college towns, because you didn't play college towns in the metal scene. It was like forbidden, So we all of a sudden found this new market, which was college towns. So we could go play. We had an agent that booked college bands, like college rock, and we would play all the big college rock bars that everybody played. And that was a good opening of the door for us, because we started getting a name for ourselves and getting a following every time we came back, and we would play, and we'd make mailers, and we'd go around and get people's addresses after the shows, and we'd send them, we'd mail off invitations to our shows. When next time we were coming to town, we'd come back every 3 months. We would do that kind of circuit where every 3 months we'd hit the same places. And just enough time for it to pass where people wanted to see you again, but not enough time to forget you. So we did that, and we would be in the van folding J cards that we made at Kinko's of our demos and sticking stickers on the cassettes and folding them up and making stacks and putting them in boxes and getting T-shirts made by our best friend in Atlanta, who would make us T-shirts and design all the logos. And we would sell them at the shows after, and that would eventually get to a point where we would actually sell out of that stuff every show, and it would get us It would afford us gas money and one hotel room in the next town because the gigs never paid that much.
And at this point, you're singing?
I am. I'm doing 80% of the vocals, but there's also a co-vocalist with this girl, Christina, who at the time was married to Jace, the bass player, my best friend. And I did all the writing, still was not really a songwriter yet, but that came. But we were still developing our sense of DIY and our sense of showmanship and touring and the art of it.
How many members of the band are there?
4 at this point. And it was still the 3 guys from South Gang. It was me, Slug, the drummer, and Jace, the bass player, with Christina. And we put out a record as the Floyds, and Christina got pregnant. And when she got pregnant, she was like telling us at rehearsal one day in tears that we're going to have a baby, and we don't want, they knew how much that the band meant to me because it was my life. I had sacrificed everything my whole life, my relationships, jobs, everything just to do the band, And so the band was everything to me. And so they were like, we're going to have to obviously take time off, probably take a year off. And so understood. And of course I was very supportive of them because they were my best friends, and I was proud and happy for them as well. But I was like, but what the fuck am I going to do? I don't want to replace them. That band is that band. So I went and started a side project, and it was a side project called The Marvelous 3. And it was going to be this just total garage power pop rock band because I loved that shit. So started the band with Slug, the drummer, who, we'd been together since we were 16 years old, and got another bass player, my friend Greg Lee. Anyway, that was a short-lived stint for Greg as the bass player because we went out and played some shows and people really loved the Marvelous 3. And I remember, Jace was like, he'd come out to a show, and I think it really killed him seeing me up there playing without him. And he was like, man, I really want my gig back. He's like, if you'll let me come back. And I was like, dude, you're my brother, till the end. So Greg understood, and it was a bummer, but Greg and I are still super close to this day. So Jace comes back in, and we are definitely at that point the Marvelous 3. I played him a bunch of demos of songs I had been working on at the little guest house I'd been squatting in. I played him this song called Freak of the Week. I thought it was kind of a silly song because it sounded like I was an obvious attempt at me to make a radio song. And I'd been up to that point like a kind of a stuck up asshole about making anything that sounded commercial or like the radio. And even the song is about selling out. But I played him that, and Jace was like, dude, that song is a hit. That's great. And I was like, well, cool, whatever. I just blew it off. And I was like, he's like, no, man, that's the one. I was like, really? That one? Oh, whatever. Ended up, I got it into the hands of a local radio station in Atlanta called 99X, which was playing all the coolest, alternative radio hits. And the program director, Leslie Fram, was a huge influence in the country. Whenever she played something, all the other stations in the country would play what she played. So I took the demo into the local guy who had the locals only show on Sunday nights, and I played him 3 or 4 songs, and on a CD, on a blank CD, he was like tapping his foot and he was into it, and then he put on Freak of the Week and got to the chorus after a minute and shut it off and said, follow me. And he walked me right into the program director's office, Leslie Fram's, while she was in the middle of a meeting, put his ass on the line and said, Leslie, if you got a second, you need to hear this. Put it on. And she said, that song's a smash. So, I'm sitting there kind of like getting a little bit pale being told this by the tastemaker of radio, of hits around the country at the time. So she said, I'm going to put this into rotation on my station if you don't mind. And I was like, oh, please don't be fucking with me. I was like, please don't be pulling my leg, because I'll be heartbroken, because this is like, I mean, I was literally living in a van and like squatting in a carriage house above a garage, making records with a microphone and a little makeshift recording rig. That's how I made all that recording. Yeah, so she started playing that song, and then record companies started offering us blank checks, you know.
So that song was the next success for you.
Yeah, that song became a top 5 hit nationwide. Got me another record deal and a pretty sizable publishing deal. And I definitely owe a lot to Steve Craig and Leslie Framford for going out on a limb for me like that.
But for you, it was a completely different approach. It was a DIY approach versus the first go around.
Totally. I made the whole album. I made that whole independent recording and that whole record in that carriage house with 2 microphones. I didn't have anything else.
Is that how you made the transition into producing records for other people?
Yeah. So basically, after I made that record and they started playing that version on the radio.
You didn't re-record it. They were playing the version?
No, well, we re-recorded half of it. Like I was kind of like, as a aspiring producer, I thought that it wasn't good enough. So we had to go finish a record. We needed to finish actually recording a record because we didn't have there was so much of it that needed to be like done and redone and everything. And so we went in with another producer and we started kind of putting finishing touches on the record and adding more guitars and adding new vocals and redoing the drums on some of them and all that. And essentially recutting the record. But that song that was on the radio but it was too late. That song was already, as people would say now, had gone viral and was already a big hit. And that was all done in the guest house with very little. And so it was proof that you really didn't have to have a lot of stuff or a pedigree or a degree in music or production or be a $2,000 a day recording studio. Didn't need all that to make something worthy. That became the beginning of getting a lot of phone calls by labels going, so we hear that you produced this song yourself and, did you engineer it yourself? Yes. Did you write it? Yeah. Did you play it? Yeah, I played it. Okay, so would you want to write and produce for this artist and this artist and this artist? And so based on just one little song of my own, that's when I started getting calls to do it for other people.
What was the first hit for you as a producer for somebody else?
So there was another band that had called that was kind of on the track to try to sound like us and wanted a song like Freak of the Week. So their manager hit me up and said, these guys just got signed to RCA Records. Can you get together with a singer and write another Freak of the Week? So the singer sent me a demo, like scatting through this like melody of a song. And I was like, oh yeah, that's catchy. Okay, cool. So got together, we co-wrote the whole song, got the rest of it. I think I wrote maybe the chorus or something around his melody. And then we wrote the verses and it was a song by this group called SR71, which was another number band like us. And that song actually was even more popular. It got even bigger than Freak of the Week. So from there...
How did that feel for you?
I felt great because I was like, okay, I didn't think I ever wanted to do that job. I was like, oh, I'm never going to like produce other people. I'm going to be on the road 300 days a year, my own band, doing my own thing, doing my own records. I don't want to do other people's shit. But it opened up a new world of like, oh, there's a lot of possibilities where I get to exercise my creativity, for lack of a better cliche. I was like, I want to be able to get into the studio and like exercise all these influences I grew up with and do it. So
there was no ego at all.
Oh, there was plenty of ego for me back then.
No, but I mean, you have the second go around, you got success. You write a song that obviously does very well, and then get asked to do it again, and you do it again for somebody else, and it goes even bigger than what you did.
Oh, no, that was great because, well, I mean, at the end of the day, it's like I'm taking home a good paycheck from it, better than the one for even maybe from my own. And I'm also getting more opportunities now because if it would have just been my own thing the whole time, that's short-sighted and short-lived because that band lasted about as long as South Gang did in hindsight. But that was okay with me because at that point I had like people calling me. Like at that point, I remember I'd worked with this pop punk band from Canada that was doing well called Simple Plan. And I produced a single for them. And then they were on tour opening for Avril Lavigne, who had just sold 10 million records. And they told her, oh, you should work with this guy, Butch. And then she calls me. And then I end up doing 3 or 4 songs on her next record, including the first 2 singles. And they're both top 10 and number 1 hits. And then all of a sudden you got Katy Perry and Pink, and then you got all these other people calling you. And then it's just all over the map from there. So it was kind of fun because it was like, oh, I like this because I get to dabble in all genres, and not just be stuck writing the same song over and over again, because that doesn't interest me at all.
When the decision came to end the Marvelous Three, I'm assuming that ended in a dramatically different fashion than South Gang, whereby it was an amicable end.
It was extremely amicable for Marvelous Three. Matter of fact, it was very hard, gut-wrenching for us to break up, but we had to.
Is it a creative thing? Is it a personal thing?
Well, first of all, I was itching to do other things, and I had my loyalty to my band. And I wanted so bad to explore new avenues, and I knew that we couldn't do that as Marvelous Three. And we were also pretty much locked in perpetuity in a contract with Elektra Records as the Marvelous Three, as long as that band existed. So for us, it was like, okay, they fucked us sideways on our second record, did and said a lot of shitty things. We were not happy. We were drinking extremely and heavily. Jace was like off the deep end, needing to he was like, man, I'm going to need to leave the band. I got to go home and focus on my family. And I was like, great. Absolutely. Do that, because I think it's time. It's time for all of us to call it a day. And we went out swinging though, man. We went out we went out playing our last 2 shows in Atlanta. We're playing in front of 30,000 each, headlining Music Midtown Festival and headlining a concert in Centennial Park. It was awesome. Played the last note, all went to the bus and sat in the back of the lounge and cried like babies on each other's shoulders at all that we had accomplished, because we'd been from moving to LA, from starting a band together when I was 16 years old, to touring the world and being left for dead in China and everything in between, and getting signed twice in 2 different bands and repeating our history twice. We had a lot of great memories to leave. And we just made a pact that we would never, ever lose sight of our friendship and never let us become bitter or blame anything on anybody, and know that this was great. And we're still the best of friends to this day.
When did you know it was time to go back to LA?
So the genre that I was succeeding in and thriving in and coming up in was not in Atlanta. It was in LA. I was on a plane every other week going to LA to write, to produce. So I was just living in hotels. I was just living at the Chateau Marmont all the time, which was awesome. But I was away from home and away from my girl. And I was like, okay, so I just built this amazing studio in Atlanta, but I was never there anymore. So I was like, okay, we sold that. We moved back to LA. I guess it was probably 06, 05.
How did that feel, moving back to LA for the second time?
Well, it was way different then, obviously. Different haircut, different clothes, same leather jacket. It was way different because I went back to LA with money this time. I bought a house in the Hollywood Hills. I did the whole fucking cliche, and was like, okay, this is it. Now I'm going to do it, And I was out at all the fucking stupid parties every night, and out at all the velvet rope shit every night, and all the industry stuff that I kind of hated, but at the same time I was big time victim to at the time. That combined with an ego, a pride bent ego of I fucking did this. This is my time. It's my moment. Because after coming through so many failures and taking that long to get there, and then I finally had some money and notoriety, I guess you want to call whatever that is, I let it go straight to my head.
And then what happened?
Woo! So we had found out that we were expecting our kid and kind of knew that we needed to get out of there. I was starting to get pretty dark anyway there. There was some darkness happening. I was partying too much and believing the hype and getting in random scuffles and at bars with assholes and other producers and just stupid shit, you know? So we really loved the beach and we really loved Malibu. So it was like, okay, we can afford it now. Let's go find a place where I can have a studio and a house. And we moved out there and we found a big house nestled in the canyon. We rented it for 6 months, for a year basically, but and it was awesome until 8 months into it. We were in New York City and I was playing an acoustic show. I had the family with me. James was only 6 months old, so he was still like in a stroller basically. And the Santa Ana winds kicked up while we were gone, which is, if anybody's not familiar with that, it's a really bad wind that has no constant direction. It's erratic and goes up to like 80 miles an hour, and they're hot winds. So one little spark can set off a wildfire, and a wildfire raged through Malibu. Some kids had started a fucking bonfire up in the canyon camping out illegally when the Santa Ana winds were happening. And I wake up after playing the show the night before, this acoustic show I was playing, with like a bunch of messages from people back home because it's way earlier there. It's like 5 a.m. there. And people are like going, are you home? Are you home? You got to get out of your house, get out of your house, get out of your house. And I was like, oh, wait, what do you mean? What do you mean? And I turned on the news and I saw that Malibu was on fire. And I had friends calling me saying, I can see off in the distance where your house is and the hillside's on fire behind your house. Well, we had a scare like that a couple of months before that with the Santa Anas, and it came within a mile and then changed directions and moved away. And I just realized this just must be how it is out there. And nothing ever really happens. Maybe they extinguish it before it happens and gets out of hand. And to be fair, it had been a long time since there had been any sort of like mass spread wildfire out there taking tons of homes. So we had a friend there dog sitting our dogs at the house. And I called him and said, hey, are you up? And he goes, yeah, the dogs are running around like something's wrong. And I was like, I think there's fires close by. You need to like maybe take the dogs and get out of there. In the meantime, my friend Ryan was down the road, and I talked to him and I said, hey man, if you could you go over to the house and maybe just grab some like memorials and things like, you know, war memorial flags and medals and stuff from military family of my wife, and like maybe some artwork, then maybe a couple of guitars, just in case something happens. I was still convinced it was not going to be a big deal. And I heard back from him like, 30 minutes later, and he was like out of breath and coughing and choking. And he just was like, man, I tried to get up there. There was so much smoke. The cops had the street blocked off. I ran over the barricade with my truck though, and got past them and went up there, and I couldn't get close to the house because of the flames and blah, blah, blah. I was like, what, I was like, what are you talking about? And he just goes, man, I don't know how to say this, but your house is gone. He's like, your fucking house is gone. Everything's gone. And I was just like.
And this isn't just your house. This is your studio.
My studio, everything. Cars, everything. Just everything's engulfed in flames and gone. And so that was a very sobering, moment. Just like sitting there in a Starbucks with tears in my eyes, really, because I was just in shock that could have happened, and I got to go out. I got to go back up to the hotel room and wake up my wife and tell her. And that was a very brutal day. It taught me a lot about perspective and what's important. And, nobody got hurt. My animals got out. And even though literally not one single item that we owned survived, it was still kind of beautiful and miraculous that I didn't go do that show by myself and leave them there.
Where are you emotionally at this point?
We were really sad. I mean, we were distraught because then you start going through literally making a manifest in your mind and on paper of everything that you had for insurance purposes. For one, that's sobering because we were renting the house, so we didn't own it yet. So we didn't have anything but renter's insurance, and renter's insurance didn't cover anything more than $25,000. But you're sitting there just going through your mind of you're going through every crack of the house and by photographic memory and thinking of every little thing. And then you think of something and go like, oh, my dad gave me that, or my mom gave me that. And it was just very disheartening and saddening. Where my head went immediately from there was the outpouring of support and friendship from people that just blew me away. Two of the biggest producers in rock and roll at the time, Brendan O'Brien, who was an Atlanta boy, Pearl Jam, Stone Temple Pilots, Bruce Springsteen, you name it, and Jack Joseph Puig, who had done everybody as well. Like, I mean, he's a huge producer. Both like called me like within the same week and were just like, they're like, man, I don't know what I would do if I lost all my stuff, my studio. Cause these guys were like vintage gear hoarder collectors, had the best collection of recording gear ever. And they knew that I always had my own stuff and worked on my own beloved gear and everything. And they were just like, I'll be mad at you if you don't come get and borrow anything you want. Like, I want you to know you can take anything you want and come record at my studio for free. Doesn't matter. Just like, and the outpouring of that happened was beautiful. I mean, because it's not like our bank burned. We still had money in the bank. The loss that we took financially was terrible and a lesson to learn. But what was amazing was just, if you didn't have friends, that would be even harder. Like it's way more important than anything else. You know, like we couldn't stop people from bringing over bags and bags of clothes from clothing companies and all that. I mean, I felt extremely spoiled and gluttonous, and I felt like I felt undeserving of it, you know. This makes me want to cry saying it, because I think about people all the time that don't even have anyone to love them and don't have anybody to be there for them. And here I am getting everything I could ever want, instantly replaced, given back to me. You know, it changes your perspective. So I don't cry over a fire. I more get upset and emotional over people that, if that happened to them and they had nothing and no one to help them out. So it's kind of nice to know how valuable friendship is.
I'm assuming at this point, there's no band. It's just Butch Walker solo.
Yeah. I'd put out 3 records as a solo artist under my name. And I was making a 4th. This is also something great that came from the fires was, at that point I had finally money in the bank, security, family, job, everything, and everything I could have ever wanted. 1 of everything, 2 of everything. Kind of gluttonous, you know, which is what some people go through when they first get money, you know. And what I didn't have was a song. I couldn't write a song to save my life. I was completely numb and emotionless and uninspired and desensitized, sitting out at that big house in that big studio with all that gear. And I was in the biggest writer's block I'd ever been in, emotionally, lyrically, you name it. And even though I don't think my records mean a lot in the grand scheme of things to, you know, the masses, I don't really sell a lot of records, or people don't really hear them as much as the stuff I do for other people. And that's fine, but they mean more to me than anything. And they keep feeding the fire for me to do music for other people. So they're important. They are a tool for me, as well as an outlet to express myself, right? Just like anybody else. And I love it. And I'm lucky that I've got a fan base that loves it and wants to come be a part of it and see it and sing along to every word. And that'll never be lost on me. So when you hit that block, it's frightening, because I was like, shit, I'm going to hit this block for writing it for others and producing for others too. And so leading up to that point, I had run out of things to say and feel. And then the fire happened. And then the floodgates opened up. I realized it takes, you know, sometimes a tragedy. It was a blessing in disguise.
As you said, sometimes the records aren't as commercially successful, but for you, what's the value in being able to make exactly what you want?
Well, again, it's that thing of having of flying under the radar. You have the freedom to go wherever you want, and you have the freedom to do what you want with less people telling you how to do it. And sure, I realized before I had any gray hairs that I could have easily have made the record that sounded like what was on the radio that I made for other artists. I could have done it. I knew how to do it. I did it for them. And I could have done it for myself, but it was never what I believed in doing. And I thought that if I could play the long game here, even if it means having a fraction of the following, you know, the fraction of the admirers or whatever, you fans, then so be it. You know, at least maybe I'll still be able to do it a long time from now because maybe these people will appreciate. And that's vain, sometimes thinking that people are going to appreciate it the way you do or see it the way you do. Maybe they just like you because you yell a lot on the mic and they have fun at your shows because you tell funny jokes or whatever. But I like to think that a lot of it connects lyrically to people. At least that's what a lot of them tell me. And that makes me happy. So I feel like I'm going to always be able to make records the way I want to make them as long as I'm in charge, as long as I'm not worried about the outcome of it too.
I want to circle back a little bit to this transformation and this growth from being, as you said, a redneck boy from Georgia to, you know, the man that you are now. How does American Love Story play into that transformation?
American Love Story is a rock opera, for lack of a better word, a couple of words. It's a love story about hate in America. And I made this record and put it out last year during the pandemic, but I had written and recorded the record 2 years prior to that and just sat on it because, I was like, okay, it seemed like an ambitious idea at the time, but who really needs a fucking rock opera? Additionally, I wrote it right after the Charlottesville, Virginia riots, the race riots. And, you know, when I saw what was going on TV, I saw boys, white boys everywhere that looked like everybody I knew growing up. And I could have easily have been one of them if things just had not gone differently, because I knew what a lot of those guys had been raised to believe. I knew what they had been raised to think, because you're not born to hate, you're taught it. And growing up in rural Georgia, where it was normal to see KKK Klansmen on the side of the road, you know, looking for donations at red lights, you know, in like southern little, you know, peanut towns, and hearing your friends crack racist jokes and gay jokes constantly, and me being complicit and fine with it because it was just normal. And that's normalized to these people that you saw in Charlottesville and what we saw on the Capitol steps. Now, making a record about that is lofty because who wants to hear this from a fucking white middle-aged man, you know? So that's why I didn't put it out, because I was like, I don't want to like come off as like some entitled, you know, white dude who feels like he's above that. But at the same time, it's autobiographical in a lot of ways, you know? I mean, the characters they're fictional characters, but they're based on people I knew. They're based on experiences I had. And it all weaves into a story basically about, you know, a guy who grows up with a redneck, racist, hateful dad. And so therefore the son is, and he, you know, he beats up and calls a kid fag at school every day that is gay and bullies him. And then, you know, one day, years later, when they're all out of high school and dude's driving home from, you know, the gay guy's driving home from a party one night, and he sees this truck overturned on the side of the road and it's on fire. Clearly it was an accident, and he pulls a body unconscious out of the truck and resuscitates the victim. And as they look each other dead in the eyes, it's the guy, it's the protagonist that beat his ass and was a complete bigoted, racist asshole. And he just had his life saved by the very thing he hated. And so it just goes through this whole story of like reshaping his brain and his mind and his mindset on what he's been taught his whole life, and retraining his brain. Yeah, it's a bittersweet story, but it's ugly along the way. But I think I learned a lot from doing it, because when I was playing it, not live, but when I was playing the music back and playing the songs back for people that I really trusted, like my inner circle, like my family or my manager, or even some of my close musical friends. I was open to feedback, and I wanted people to tell me, is this stupid? Is this bad? Is this a horrible idea? Because normally I wouldn't care when I put a record out what anybody else thinks. I wouldn't even let them hear it first. But this one, it was like, I just want to see if this is going to resonate with anyone at all. And, luckily a lot of people it resonated with. And I got a lot of help and a lot of advice the 2 years prior to putting it out, on reshaping some of it to make sure it told the story this way and that way and didn't come off misconstrued this way and that way. And so it was definitely a collaborative effort by a lot of people who I love their hearts and their minds. So, but I didn't do anything with it until 2 years later. And sadly, nothing had changed with this last regime.
Did you feel any vulnerability putting it out?
That's the whole reason I didn't do anything with it, because I was like, I don't know if I want to put this out and people misconstrue it. Or worse, the hate is going to pile on regardless, because you're going to find out who people are very quickly.
Well, how has it been received?
Well, by and large, amazing. Like I'd say I was pleasantly surprised. I thought it'd be about half and half, but it wasn't. I'd say it was about 20% maybe people that were showing their true colors and being like, what the fuck, bro? Like that whole thing. And it's like, whoa, you're telling me who you are right now. Like if you listen to the whole thing all the way through and the only conclusion you can draw from it is what the fuck, bro, and you're offended by it, then maybe you're part of the problem. Doesn't matter if you don't like the music. As a matter of fact, that's your best out, is just say, oh, I hate the way this is produced. Hate the snare sound on that record. Fuck him. But that's kind of, you actually get rage from people because they see that the finger's been pointed directly at them and the mirror has been turned around on them. And so I would get some rage. I got rage from some people.
At this point, you have achieved success on many different levels and in many different ways. Looking at that record, do you feel like that was a success?
Well, sure. I mean, during a pandemic where hardly anybody hears anything anybody puts out because you can't tour on it, you can't do anything, and there's millions of people putting records out a year now. It's crazy. It's hard to keep up. It's easy to get lost in the shuffle. And I actually knew that after waiting and holding out for 2 years, that putting it out during the pandemic would be just like, okay, it is what it is. But I also knew that this was going to be a really hard record to tour on unless I got out there and played the whole thing front to back. Because you can't just like go pick 1 or 2 songs from that record and pepper it in with a bunch of older material from other records, because it's like easy to take the lyrics way out of context, because I kind of pulled a Randy Newman and did a lot of the songs and, from the perspective of the bad guy. And if you don't know the context of that without hearing the whole record front to back as a story, you'd be like, what the fuck did he just say? And I didn't want people, I wanted to be able to play it front to back, but that's also it's also just asking a lot of your audience to be like, hey, come see me on tour again this year. I won't be playing any songs that you've come to see. I'm only going to be playing a 45-minute record from beginning to end that you don't know. That's a very uncomfortable subject. So the pandemic was, what shall we say, divine intervention, where it got me off the hook from having to go out and figure out how I was going to tour on this record. I think the goal was just to put it out and let it reach who it could. So I think, just putting it out was a success for me, just actually not sitting on it and shelving it, because I know a lot of people that make records like that and they don't put them out because they're too scared of what their fans might think.
How do you define failure?
Failure is not falling on your face from trying something. That's for sure. I'd say failure is never falling on your face because you never tried anything. That to me is failure. I would rather fail by trying. And so I think failure is also being accepted by tons of people and having admirers everywhere you go and having wealth, money from it, but you're doing what you really don't want to be doing and you wish you were doing something else. And there is a lot of people doing that because I've had one too many drunken conversations with people like that. And it's like, oh, you've got money, you're successful, and even some of these people famous. And it's like, but why do you seem unhappy? And it's like, well, because I wish I was doing this, but I can't do that because I'll lose this. And I realize I'm a little entitled to say that because my green card came from having success early on as a producer writer for other people. So it gave me the freedom to do what I wanted. But I was also at that crossroads where I was ready to quit music if I had to do one more fucking pie eating contest, bikini contest judge bullshit, wake up zoo crew thing in the morning that wasn't about music, but it was about supporting a single you had out and they didn't care. It started tearing my soul apart. And I was like, I was ready to quit. I was really ready to quit. I was ready to go back to, just literally squatting in an apartment if I had to with whoever and playing out, making my own music for 10 people a night. And in some places I still do only play to 10 people a night, but at least it's not that many anymore.
Is there a particular professional failure that you look back on that ultimately set you up for success?
Well, a failure of my own would definitely be the first band that I had, the first band that got signed, when we got handed everything we ever wanted and wished for at the gate. And then we blew it and everybody blew it and it fell in its face and it failed. And then you had no one to blame. You blamed everybody else when you should just be blaming yourself. That was the best medicine I could have ever gotten, to be like, okay, let's do this. Let's do it ourselves now. Let's do everything. I'm going to do everything myself. And I'm going to make sure that if I failed, I did it my way,
What does happiness mean to you?
I don't know. I don't know if a lot of artists probably can't answer that sincerely, because I don't think we're ever satisfied by nature. I think, we're narcissists, some sociopaths, but like we're definitely narcissists in the sense that we want praise for our work and we want to be lauded for it. But at the same time, we might do something and then we'll dismiss it right after we do it and go like, yeah, but I can do better than that. Fuck that. So I feel like a lot of times that if you can find, to me, I think true happiness would be letting go of that and being content and happy with where you are in your career, in life, your accomplishments. And by and large, I'm very happy with all of my accomplishments. It might have taken me up to right now to say that, but because I don't think about it that much. But thinking back, I'm very proud of everything I've gotten to do and the things I've overcome, for sure, and where I'm at.
You've had the ability throughout your career to evolve, obviously, as a human being, as an artist, as a producer. What do you think the value is in evolution as an artist?
Well, I think it's horrible if you're AC/DC or the Ramones, because they've got a formula and they do what they do, and it worked and it's great. But I think for the most part, they need to evolve for self-satisfaction and for just, you're constantly reaching goals. It's just like very important to constantly stretch yourself, I think. And I always hate it when artists, and I'm sure that I'm guilty, or maybe some fans might accuse me of this in my little circle. They might think you get lazy or don't put out what they like, so they think you're phoning it in. But I personally am scared to death of phoning it in, because I've just heard so many artists that I really loved growing up, and if they do anything now in their later years, when they're around, my age or whatever, and it's just like, oh man, you just don't care anymore. Mostly people that are successful and don't need it, because they'll go, oh, let's go tour and, it'll be great. Fuck the record. But I don't have that luxury. It's like, it's got to mean something every time for my soul and spirit, and also to go play it and mean it live for people.
What would you say to 18-year-old Butch Walker?
What wouldn't I say? I mean, I would say, shut up. I would say, prepare for the long haul. Quit rushing shit. Quit rushing your playing. Quit rushing your singing. Quit rushing life. And I would say, don't get that first tattoo until you're 30, for sure.
How would you describe what you do for a living?
Lucky. I would just say I'm lucky. I'm fortunate that I get to eat, live, and breathe music 24/7. And if I ever get sick of it, somebody needs to slap me.
Butch Walker, thank you for speaking with me.
Thanks for having me, man. Loved it.
The Days Between is a production of Noah Abrams Studio. Story editing by Andrew Henry. Mixing and mastering by Todd Stapera and Reference Recording. Website design by John Fisher. Theme music is by Evo. The Days Between can be found online at www.thedaysbetweenpodcast.com and on Instagram at The Days Between Podcast. My name is Noah Abrams. Thanks for listening.